I wasn't planning on seeing her that morning. Honestly, I wasn't planning on seeing anyone. The coffee shop on the corner was just convenient. Half the time the barista spelled my name wrong, the tables wobbled, and the Wi-Fi cut out when the weather turned. Still, I kept coming back. Maybe because it was quiet enough to get lost in my own head. Maybe because routines feel safer than choices. I'd settled into my usual corner seat with my chipped laptop and a notebook I barely used. My phone sat on the table, screen dark, one half-written text unsent in the draft box. I'd started to type to a friend last night, then stopped. What was I even going to say? Hey, want to hang out? It sounded needy. That's when she walked in. She carried herself in a way that made people glance twice without realizing why. Not glamorous, not loud, just composed. My friend's mom. I hadn't seen her in months. She was in a navy sweater, her hair pulled back, a tote bag slung carelessly on her shoulder like she'd left the house in a hurry. She noticed me before I had a chance to duck my head. Her eyes warmed in recognition. Then she smiled like it was no big deal, like seeing me here was as normal as finding me in her kitchen back when I used to crash at her son's place. Didn't know you lived around here, she said, as she ordered. Oh yeah? Just a couple blocks over. My voice caught halfway, but she didn't tease. She just nodded, like she filed that away. She got her coffee and, without asking, sat at the table across from mine. Close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the way she tapped her spoon against the cup twice before setting it down. You still take it black? She asked, glancing at my mug. I hadn't realized she'd noticed something so small before. Yeah, I said, awkwardly tugging at the sleeve of my hoodie. Guess I never grew out of it. Her laugh was quiet, like she didn't want to draw attention. Most people grow out of black coffee, not into it. I smiled without meaning to. The conversation drifted, her asking about classes, me giving vague answers, her talking about the neighborhood. But the pauses were where it felt different. The silence between words wasn't heavy. It was watchful. She looked at me in a way that made it hard to sit still, like I was more than filler noise in her morning. I found myself folding the edge of my napkin into smaller and smaller squares, just to keep my hands busy. Every so often, my eyes flicked toward hers, then down to her hands wrapped around the cup. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated. One hand on the tote strap, she tilted her head like she wanted to say something else, but thought better of it. Instead, she just said, "It was good running into you. But let's keep this between us, HM. No reason to make it a story." Her smile was easy, but her eyes lingered a little too long. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what this even was. A conversation? A coincidence? Or something I was only just starting to feel the edges of? She left. I sat there, the napkin folded into a tight little square in my palm, my coffee cold. When I finally picked up my phone, there was a new message waiting. From her. It only said, I wasn't supposed to see her again so soon. But a few days later, she texted, "Are you around? Could use an extra hand." No details. Just that. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. I knew I should have ignored it, should have at least thought it through. But 10 minutes later, I was standing in front of her apartment door, trying to smooth out the nervous folds in my hoodie. She opened the door with a laugh I hadn't heard before, short, almost embarrassed. "Sorry to rope you into this. I can't get the damn bookshelf to stay upright." I followed her in. The place smelled faintly of tea and cedar wood. Lived in, not staged. A stack of unopened mail sat on the counter. Her shoes were left just by the mat. The bookshelf leaned crooked against the wall like it had already given up. She handed me a screwdriver. I thought I could do it myself. Turns out stubbornness doesn't substitute for upper body strength. I knelt down, trying to focus on aligning the screws. She crouched beside me, hair falling loose from her bun, and for a second I forgot which hole the screw was supposed to go in. "You're quieter than I remember," she said. I shrugged. "Guess I don't talk much unless someone asks." She nodded, like that made sense. "Your friend, my son, he always filled the air. You were the opposite." It felt strange hearing her compare us. Stranger still knowing she remembered enough to say it out loud. We worked in silence until the shelf stood straight. She tested it with a hand on the top, and it wobbled just slightly. We both laughed. Not at the shelf, at ourselves. You want tea? She asked suddenly, already moving toward the kitchen. I should have said no. I should have excused myself right there. Instead, I sat at her kitchen table while she boiled water, tapping the edge of my phone against my knee. She placed a mug in front of me. Green tea, no sugar. That's how you used to drink it, right? I froze. You remember that? She looked almost embarrassed at her own attention. I noticed things, even when I shouldn't. The silence after that stretched. Not uncomfortable, but charged. I caught myself imagining how this might look from the outside. Me, a 20-year-old kid, sitting across from a woman who'd once reminded me to wipe my shoes before walking through her hallway. This probably feels strange, she said softly, eyes fixed on her own mug. Having tea with your friend's mom. Yeah, I admitted. But not in a bad way. Her gaze lifted to mine, steady, searching. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. She told me a small story then, about moving into this apartment after her divorce. About how the silence of living alone was heavier than she'd expected. How she still caught herself buying groceries for two. I guess you don't unlearn habits overnight, she said, stirring her tea though she hadn't added anything to it. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, letting her words hang between us. Part of me wanted to tell her about the unsent texts sitting in my phone, the way I sometimes walked out just to have a reason to come back. But I stayed quiet. Instead, I noticed the way her fingers curled around the mug, how she tapped the rim twice before setting it down. The smallest details became impossible to ignore. When it was time to leave, she walked me to the door. Neither of us seemed to want to open it. She reached up suddenly, brushing at my shoulder. Dust, she said, though I couldn't feel any. Her hand lingered for half a beat too long before she pulled it back. I laughed nervously. Thanks for saving me from public embarrassment. Her smile returned, faint but warm. That's what I'm here for. As I stepped into the hallway, I caught myself thinking, I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It happened again. Too soon, too close. I'd stopped by the coffee shop one late afternoon, the usual corner seat waiting for me. Halfway through my cup, I heard her voice behind me. Lo, familiar. I turned, and there she was, sliding her tote bag off her shoulder like she belonged there. Mind if I join? I shook my head, though my chest tightened. We fell into the same rhythm as before, small talk circling bigger silences. Her sweater sleeve brushed my arm as she leaned closer to see something on my screen. I tried to breathe normally. Failed. She noticed. I could tell. Are you always this serious? She teased softly. I don't think so. My laugh was short, awkward. Her eyes lingered, as if she was waiting for something more. I didn't have it. Not yet. The door chimed. My friend, her son, walked in, earbuds in, heading straight for the counter. Her hand stilled on the table. My pulse jumped. He didn't see us. Or maybe he chose not to. Either way, the moment shattered. She leaned back in her chair, body pulled tight, like she'd suddenly remembered where we were. Who we were? We didn't talk much after that. She finished her coffee too quickly, eyes on the window instead of me. I folded my napkin into smaller and smaller squares again, trying not to notice how different she felt at arm's length. When her son left, she finally exhaled. That was close, she murmured, almost to herself. I nodded. My throat felt dry. We walked out together, the air between us strangely heavier. Outside, the sky was soft gray, the kind that made everything feel paused. At the curb, she hesitated. I thought she'd say goodbye, thought she'd step away and leave it at that. Instead, she looked straight at me, eyes sharp but uncertain. This, whatever this is, she said quietly, we should be careful. I wanted to ask what she meant. Careful of what? Him? Us? Herself? But the word stuck. We stood there, too close, her hand brushing mine as she shifted her bag. Neither of us moved. For a split second, the world blurred, the cars, the people passing. Just her, inches away, her breath caught like mine. If I'd leaned forward even slightly, but she pulled back first. A small step, almost nothing. See you, she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And just like that, she was gone. I stood frozen, hand still tingling from where it almost fit against hers that IT was late when I ran into her again. Not at the coffee shop this time. Not planned. I was walking back from the store, a plastic bag of groceries biting into my hand, when I saw her sitting on the bench outside our building. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't reading, just sitting, watching the street like it might hand her an answer. "Hey," I said quietly, stopping a few feet away. She looked up, startled, then softened. "You're out late." "Milk run." I lifted the bag like proof. "Oh." She smiled faintly. "Essential." I sat down beside her without asking. The night was cool, the kind that pressed silence into the air. Her sweater sleeve brushed mine, and neither of us shifted away. For a while, we just sat there, listening to cars in the distance. My pulse was louder. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. "He doesn't call as much anymore. My son." I looked at her. Her eyes stayed on the street. "College friends. Work. Life." She let out a breath. "That's how it should be. But sometimes I wonder if I did something wrong. If I was too much or not enough." I didn't know what to say. I thought about all the times I typed messages and deleted them, about the way silence stretched in my own life. "You weren't wrong," I said finally. Her head turned, slow, like she didn't expect me to answer at all. Her eyes lingered. Searching. I fiddled with the grocery bag, plastic crinkling under my fingers. Sometimes people just drift. Doesn't mean they stop needing you. The words hung there longer than I meant them to. She studied me, and something in her face shifted, like a guard lowering, just slightly. "You sound older than 20, she said softly. I laughed under my breath. "I don't feel it." Silence again. Not empty. Pressed full. Then she asked, almost too casually, "Do you tell anyone when you feel lonely?" I shook my head. "Doesn't really come up." Her hand tightened on the bench slat. "That's the hard part. The quiet things don't come up. You just carry them." I wanted to say I see you carrying yours, but the words wouldn't shape. She turned fully toward me now, eyes sharper, unsettled. "We should stop this," she said suddenly. My chest tightened. "Stop what?" "Whatever we're doing." Her voice was low, urgent. "Meeting like this. Talking like this. It's not right." I swallowed, throat dry. I didn't think we were doing anything. Her gaze cut into me, like she was trying to believe that too. But she didn't. "You don't understand," she whispered. She stopped. "Just what?" Her lips pressed tight, like she wished she could take it all back. Her hand was on the bench between us, fingers curling, uncurling. I almost covered them with mine. Almost. "Instead," I said quietly, "then why are you here? Sitting out in the cold?" Her breath caught. She looked away. The seconds stretched, sharp as glass. Then she turned back, eyes glistening in the streetlight. "Because you look at me like I'm still someone." The air shifted. My body leaned without thinking, hers too, just a fraction. Her breath mingled with mine, close enough I could taste the tea from earlier that day. Her hand brushed against my knee. Not a touch, just an accident. Or maybe not. For a heartbeat, nothing else existed. Then she pulled back, barely, her voice unsteady. "If this keeps going, what happens to us?" Her question hung in the air, unanswered, heavier than any kiss could have been. The next week, she disappeared. Not literally. Her car was still in its usual spot. Her curtains still shifted at night. But she stopped coming to the coffee shop. Stopped sending those small, offhand texts. Stopped appearing in places I'd started to expect her. I told myself not to notice. Not to count the days. But routines reveal what you've lost. Every empty corner table felt sharper, every folded napkin pointless. After 4 days, I almost texted her. I typed, "Everything okay?" Then deleted it. On the 6th, I saw her in the lobby. She was dressed sharper than usual, hair done, makeup subtle but there. She held a bag of groceries in one hand, keys in the other. "Hey," I said too quickly. She startled, then forced a smile. "Oh, hi." The pause that followed was new. Measured, like she was reminding herself to keep distance. "You've been busy?" I asked carefully. "Yeah, just things." She lifted the grocery bag like it could stand in for an explanation. "Work. Errands." "You know." I wanted to press. Instead, I just nodded. The elevator dinged, and she stepped in, leaving me in the lobby. No invitation. No small joke about dust on my shoulder. Just the back of her head, Hair pulled too neatly, doors closing before I could think of what to say. That night, I couldn't shake the image. The practiced smile. The way she'd drawn a line I hadn't seen coming. The next day, I ran into her son, my friend. He waved me over, earbuds dangling. Haven't seen you around lately, he said. I forced a shrug. Been busy. He grinned. Same here. Mom's been different, though. She's been talking to my dad again. The words hit harder than I expected. Your dad? Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. They're not getting back together or anything. But still, it's weird. He laughed lightly, already distracted by his phone. Anyway, I'll catch you later. I nodded, but the air in my chest felt heavy. That night, I stood outside her door, grocery bag still in my hand from my own errand. I thought about knocking. Just once. She'd open the door, maybe surprised, maybe relieved. Or maybe she'd look at me like I was making a mistake. I lifted my hand halfway, then dropped it. Back in my apartment, I stared at my phone. The unsent message still sat in drafts. Everything okay? I typed another one. Do you want to talk? Backspaced. Typed again. I missed, deleted. The screen glowed back at me, blank. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish. It was raining the night she finally opened her door. I hadn't meant to knock. My feet carried me there before my head caught up, the sound of my knuckles on the wood echoing louder than it should have. For a moment, I hoped she wouldn't answer. But she did. She looked tired, hair loose, sweater slipping at the shoulder, a shadow of hesitation in her eyes. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I know. Neither of us moved. The rain filled the silence. Finally, she stepped back. You'd better come in before someone sees. Inside, the apartment was dim, lit only by the lamp near the couch. A mug sat half-finished on the table. I followed her into the kitchen, where she leaned against the counter, arms folded like armor. I stood there, hands in my pockets, water dripping from my sleeves. You've been avoiding me. Her jaw tightened. Because it's easier. Easier than what? Her eyes flicked up, sharp. Then wanting something I can't have. The words landed heavy between us. I didn't know whether to breathe or hold still. She turned, opening a drawer just to give her hand something to do. You're too young. You're his friend. And I. She stopped, closing the drawer with a soft thud. I should know better. I swallowed hard. I never asked you to know better. Her laugh was bitter, short. That's the problem. You don't ask, but I feel it anyway. I stepped closer, not too close, but enough that she could hear me without the rain filling the space. I'm not saying this makes sense. It doesn't. But I keep thinking about you. Every day, and I don't know how to switch that off. Her eyes closed briefly, as if that admission cost her something too. Do you have any idea what people would say? She whispered. What he would say? I hesitated, then shook my head. All I know is how I feel when it's just us. When you're not pretending you don't see it too. Her hands gripped the counter edge, knuckles pale. She looked at me then, really looked, and the weight in her eyes wasn't just fear. It was longing, guilt, all twisted together. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain and the clock ticking faintly in the next room. Finally, her voice broke the quiet. I can't promise you anything. Not a future. Not even tomorrow. I'm not asking for forever, I said. My throat felt raw. I just don't want this to end without us admitting it's real. Her shoulders sagged, a wall lowering. Slowly, she reached out, hesitant, like she wasn't sure she'd follow through. Her fingers brushed my wrist. Just that. Barely a touch. But it landed deeper than any embrace. I didn't move. Didn't push. Just let the moment hold. She exhaled, almost a laugh, almost a sob. God, this is so wrong. Then why does it feel right? Her hand lingered a second longer, then slipped away. But her eyes stayed on mine. The silence after was different. Not avoidance. Not fear. Something else. Something raw and unfinished, but alive. Finally, she whispered, okay. Just that. A word, fragile as glass, but enough to carry the weight of everything unsaid. Time didn't fix everything. It just softened the edges. We didn't fall into some sweeping romance. No midnight declarations, no dramatic ultimatums. Life went on, classes, errands, her work, her son visiting every now and then. From the outside, nothing about us looked different. But I knew. And so did she. It showed up in small ways first. She started texting again. Not long messages, just quiet check-ins. 8:47 a.m. coffee. Or bench tonight. Bring tea. Little things slipped into my day like commas. I started showing up without thinking. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. The bench outside the building became ours. Rain or clear. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes she told me stories about when her son was young. Half funny, half sad. Like she couldn't quite believe that chapter had already passed. Sometimes I just sat there, listening, folding napkins or stirring tea that didn't need stirring. It wasn't about what we said. It was about the silence we shared, the kind that didn't press down anymore. The kind that made sense. She still had her walls. So did I. Some days she pulled back, quieter, like she was testing if this was still real. And every time, I stayed. Not pushing, not demanding. Just there. One evening, we sat in her kitchen, both holding mugs. Hers green tea, mine black coffee, gone cold. She reached over absent-mindedly, brushed the back of my hand with her fingertips as she reached for the sugar bowl. She didn't even notice she'd done it. But I did. And I realized something. Love wasn't in the big gestures. It was in that. The unthinking closeness. The way two lives overlap without needing to ask permission anymore. Her son never questioned why I hung around more. Maybe he thought I was avoiding my own place. Maybe he assumed I liked her cooking. Whatever it was, the truth stayed unspoken. Some things aren't meant to be explained out loud. Weeks turned into months. Routines shifted. I still found half-written messages in my drafts sometimes, things I didn't know how to say. But I stopped needing to send them. Because she was there. In her way, in mine, we'd chosen not to let this fade into silence. One night on the bench, she looked at me after a long stretch of quiet. I don't know what this is supposed to be, she admitted. I smiled, staring at the steam curling out of my thermos. Me neither. She laughed, small and tired but warm. Then she leaned her head on my shoulder, just for a moment. No one else around to see. No one else who needed to. And that was enough. I think about that first morning still. The coffee shop, the napkin folded into squares, the message she sent that said next time, my treat. She kept her word. She always did, in ways that mattered. I didn't feel like life had given me a miracle. I felt like it had handed me something quieter. A space. A pause, finally finished. Something only we would understand. Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? E-sentence.